Hey, I'm Becky Saif. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today I'm going to show you how you can do your own vocal processing chain using plugins, third-party plugins. So whichever door you're in, it doesn't really matter, as these are all third-party, and you can use them to not only take stuff away from your vocal, but also reintroduce stuff like warmth and character. So each stage of the processing has a particular purpose. I'm going to run through all the ones that I include, and maybe you can have a look and see if they're going to be working for you in your vocal processing. This topic was suggested in the Discord, so if you want to jump into the production Discord, the link is below, and there's a channel in there called Video Suggestions where you can suggest for future topics for me to cover. Also, today in this video, I'm going to show you how you can do parallel processing. So taking the same vocal, copying it down, panning it left and right, and then automating some effects. So not only do you get a nice clean vocal in the center image, but you also get some width and stereo image, which is something that just really brings vocals to life in music. So I'm going to show you all of that today. Quite a lot of plugins, and all of the plugins that I do mention will be linked below so you can check them out yourself. All right, let's go into the project. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all the processing on so you can hear what it's like with the processing completely finished. In the maze of you, what do we do? So that's the vocal, and so that's all the processing on there. Also, it is being sent to a reverb channel. If I take the reverb down, this is what it's like dry without the reverb send. In the maze of you, what do we do? And then I'm going to take the processing off and you can hear the original vocal. In the maze of you, what do we do? So you can hear that there's quite a lot of harshness in that vocal as it is originally recorded. And you can prevent things like this by having a pop filter, by getting your vocalist to stand a certain distance away from the microphone, not singing straight into the microphone and things like that. But getting a really good recording take is the most important part of all of vocals. So if you're distorting, if you're clipping, if you've got a lot of S's and then just re-record it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up Autotune by Antares. So this is Autotune Live, and you can stick this on your mic as your singer is recording, and it will actually tune as the singer is singing, which is quite a nice technique because using headphones, the singer is going to be convinced to stick in key because they're hearing the auto-tune working as they're singing the vocal. So it's really nice to stick this on when you're actually recording an artist. So the key areas of this plugin that I look for are the input type. So what kind of character or whereabouts in the frequency spectrum the person is singing. So I've put low male because I actually really like the tone of that. And then over here, you've got the key. So whatever key your track is in, you can just select there, and then you have the scale, which obviously is all these different types of harmonic scales that exist. And then humanize is a really nice control as it just adds a bit more of that human element rather than the T-Pain auto-tune that you get in a lot of music. So let's listen to it without and then listen to it with. In the maze of you, what do we do? And then the plugin is on. In the maze of you, what do we do? So not a lot of difference, but if you can see in the plugin here, you'll see around the 0 point. As soon as it moves either side of this 0, that's when it's actually triggering the auto-tune. In the maze of you, what do we do? And you kind of want it around that first section in the middle. You don't want it jumping all the way either side of that bar because then it's really working super hard unless you want that T-Pain auto-tune sound. Okay, so here's the audio effects rack inside Ableton, and these are all the plugins. So I'm just going to quickly turn all of them off. So the first one is de-esser. Now you can get a de-esser on different packs. This is the Waves plugin. So de-essers control sibilance between 2 and 10K. So it's things like sh, pss, sh, the very top of the voice, and generally it's more in the female voices as they are in the upper registers, and therefore females tend to reach that in the 2 to 10K. So I'm just going to drag the bar up to 0, and then you're going to see what it's doing as I drag the threshold down and activate the de-esser. So listen to the file and listen to the in the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do? And about there is really nice. If you pull it down too far, you're going to really start to yank that vocal and make it sound really unnatural. In the maze of you, what do we do? So just at the point where, in the maze of you, what do we do? Where the S's are peaking. So that's the first plugin, and usually I would put that first in the chain as it's something you want to get rid of and you don't want to amplify anymore. And the next plugin in the sequence is Radiator from Soundtoys, and this is a pack that I absolutely swear by, so download it. The link is below in the description. And this is modeled on the 1960s Studio A amp that adds warmth and tube color. It's really, really nice. And there's two saturation stages in this. There's the input and there's the output. So you can play around with these, and obviously you can make it a clean signal, make it into a line or a mic, and then boost up the treble and the bass at the top there, and you have a dry wet knob here. So I've just actually reduced the input and the output and then boosted up the bass. In the maze of you, what do we do? So you can hear that it's adding that warmth and color from the tubes modeled on the 1960s amp, which is super nice. The next plugin in the chain is Soothe II, and you'll have seen that I've actually done this in another video where I talk about Soothe and how it's a brilliant dynamic resonance suppressor. So it's kind of working in the same way as the de-esser, but this time it's going across the full frequency spectrum, and you can boost up here. These aren't EQ boosts, this is the amount of attenuation, and then you have this depth knob, the sharpness, and the selectivity. So if I press delta, you'll be able to hear what it's actually taking away. In the maze of you, what do we do? So that's what it's controlling, and then if I take that off, we'll listen to the vocal now with the Soothe II on. In the maze of you, what do we do? Cool, really nice. So that's a sick plugin. It's great. Okay, so the next plugin is RVox, using a soft knee compressor and also a gate, which is super nice. So you have a gate and a compressor in one plugin. So the gate is to remove all of the kind of breathy, the gaps, these gaps here in the waveform that you don't really want. This gate is actually activating as the vocal dips, so it cuts out any background noise, as well as the soft knee compressor engaging when the vocal kind of pushes a bit too much or doesn't push enough. In the maze of you, what do we do? So I would say the compression's actually a little bit too hard. In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do? Cool, great. So the next plugin in the chain is Pro Q2. Pro Q3 is out, so if you want to get Pro Q3, the link to that is below. But this is basically acting as a cutting technique. So those harsh resonances that might still be in there that maybe Soothe II and the de-esser didn't quite catch, you can just sweep up using a peak and then notch out those frequencies that you don't really want to be present in your vocal. So this is without, so the plugin is bypassed. In the maze of you, what do we do? And then we're going to activate the plugin, and you can also see that there's a high pass filter here, because actually without this high pass filter, you're introducing extra noise in your low end, which you don't really want, because what happens with things like vocals and effects and anything that sits in the upper end of the frequency spectrum, it's going to generate noise in the low end. And as you build that up over time, it's going to create a huge sandwich of just noise that then conflicts with your low end material. So high pass it and then notch out those harsh frequencies that you don't really want to be present in the music. In the maze of you, what do we do? Cool. So on to the next plugin in the chain, and it is a C4 multiband compressor. I actually have the preset on here, so this is loaded here. There's some great presets that you can choose from. I've just selected the vocal one, and like with any multiband compressor, you can move the little parameters here to select how wide you want your bands to be, and then attenuate using the gain, range, attack, and release, and your threshold knobs as well, so that you can really kind of have full control over those bands and compress them individually. And you can also boost up the notches here, or you can cut them, so you're controlling the gain of each band as well. So let's play it without.
In the maze of you, what do we do?
And then with the C4 activated.
In the maze of you, what do we do?
And you can hear that it really opens up the vocal, and I really like that because between the 1.5K and just under 16K, that's where the real presence of the vocal sits, and we've just boosted it up and controlled it a little bit more there as well. This is a very famous EQ, really nice. And if you kind of look at it as this is one section here, and this is one section here, and then this is the final section, these two here. The first part is a boost at 100 hertz. Obviously, that's not really going to be doing too much because the vocal's not really sat at 100 hertz, but I've boosted it anyway just to kind of give it that extra lift in the low end. But then if you come over to this section here, which is where the vocal really does sit at the 5K, that's where the presence is going to be in your vocal. So if you really want to open that up, 5K, and boosted it by 3, and then also just increased the bandwidth there to 8. So it's just really opening up and giving us more presence in the vocal there. So I'm going to turn it off and then I'm going to activate it so you can hear the difference.
In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do?
And the next plugin in the sequence is the API 550A. So this is another EQ, and we're adding color this time. So we're reintroducing EQ back into the vocal at 7K, and we've boosted it just by 2, and that's it. There's nothing else on there. Everything else is just at 0. So I'll play you before and then after.
In the maze of you, what do we do?
And now after, activated.
In the maze of you, what do we do?
Cool. And then the next plugin in the sequence would actually really work on a group, as it's kind of a final imaging tool, and it's Ozone's Imager. So this is separating all the bands of the vocal, and what you can do is you can monoize them by dragging it down, so you can mono the lower frequencies. And then if you want to really open them up and give a nice big stereo image, you can boost up the bands here. So it's not dynamics, it is spread into the stereo image. Obviously, this is a mono vocal right now, so it's just in the middle.
The maze of you, what do we do?
And the next plugin is Pro C. Pro C 2 is actually out. I don't have it, but Pro C is a compressor. So we're just compressing the vocal, getting some control over it.
In the maze of you, what do we do?
Fairly fast attack, fairly fast release. So you kind of pulling the vocal in as soon as it starts to peak, but you don't want to cut off like the transients too much because you want to be able to hear the dynamics in the vocal as well, and quite a kind of medium ratio, so it's just not too harsh. You don't want to be yanking the vocal, so no high ratios and no super fast attacks, otherwise you're just really yanking the vocal down, and you don't want to be doing that.
In the maze of you, what do we do?
Okay, and finally in the chain we have Sie-Q and we have SSL-EQ. So Sie-Q is another one from Soundtoys, which is why you should get the pack, because you're going to be using all of these plugins, and we're going to be using more in this video as well. So this one is just adding some brightness back into the mix. So I've just boosted up the highs there, as you can see.
In the maze of you, what do we do?
And then the next plugin in the sequence, or the final one, is a solid state plugin where we will be adding some warmth back into the image. So you can see here the low mids and the high mids are slightly boosted as well. So this is the warmth, the body of the vocal.
In the maze of you, what do we do?
Cool. So that's the vocal processing chain. And then the next thing you could do is you could send it to a reverb bus, or you could parallel it. There's two ways, but you could send it to a reverb bus. So if you've got a return channel in your project, so I've got the track reverb, Valhalla room, chorus plate, large chamber, and just start sending it until you hear the kind of quality that you want.
In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do?
So I really like that. And the great thing about having it on a return channel is that you can now automate your return channel. So if you don't want the reverb coming in all the time, you can actually either automate on the reverb channel itself, or you can automate the amount that it sends to the reverb channel and when it does that. So you've got full control over your reverb. Always put your reverb on a parallel chain or on a send so that you can then automate and control your reverb separate to your dry vocal. So the last thing we want to do with this vocal, I'm going to duplicate it now. I'm going to create 2 more instances of the vocal that we've got. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the second 2 down. And these are now going to be panned left and right. So I'm going to pan the first one 20 left and the second one 20 right. And I'm going to group them together. So these are the backing vocals. And then on top of that, we're going to use another Soundtoys plugin, and it's going to be Little Alterboy. Little Alterboy is really cool because inside of this plugin, you can actually transpose, which is so cool. So having backing vocals panned to the side, if you haven't got an opportunity to re-record some more vocals with your vocalist, but you want to create stereo width, then this is a great way to do it. Using Soundtoys, you can come down to low octave double, and then you could go to quantize, just bring the formant up to 0. And you want it to go on wet. Or maybe let's do like 75%. So you've still got some dry coming through. And now we're going to audition this vocal alongside the main one.
In the maze of you, what do we do?
So you can hear that low frequency.
In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do?
So this is adding a low frequency layer. Now, obviously, you don't want it to be conflicting with your vocal. So you can take on a precision EQ to cut it out. You can cut out the upper frequencies and the lower frequencies. Remember, we don't want that low frequency congestion, but we want this as some backing vocal to widen our image. And you could even do a mid-side EQ boost. So come down on your Pro Q and you could go to stereo placement and side. So you're boosting up the side image there in this warm area of your vocal where the lower frequencies of the vocal line will sit.
In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do?
And the great thing about having a separate backing vocal chain is that you can also add delays and reverb on there, but then you're going really over the top and crazy, so we can stick on the echo. And also now, remember, we do have the isotope imager, so let's stick that on there because this is now a stereo image. So we're going to do isotope imager, and let's take off the echo and just look at the stereo image.
In the maze of
so you can see
what do we do?
A lot more stereo than before. Put on the echo.
In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do? In the maze of you, what do we do?
So that's just adding extra width and stereo image to your vocal that you've already processed. And you can go even further with adding extra reverbs or ad-libs or chops and having a backing vocal, panning it left and right so that you're just widening everything whilst maintaining the main vocal in the central image. Hope you got something out of this video, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell so that you're notified every time I post out a new video. And if you want to drop a comment, please do. Comment section is below. Let me know what you thought. And remember, all the plugins are linked below in the description as well. I'm Becky Saif, and I will see you for another video. Bye!